Look who's here. The big boss has arrived. My husband and mother-in-law laughed at my promotion. The apartment was a mess, and the fridge was completely empty, even though I had just stocked it with groceries a couple of days ago. My husband went to sleep looking thoroughly pleased with himself, but woke up the next morning unemployed and homeless. And before we begin, I'd like to ask you to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and enjoy the story. The keys to the condo were not on the console table by the entrance where Olivia always left them, but on a shelf further down the hallway. It was a minor detail, but enough to put her on guard. She quietly pulled the door shut and looked around more carefully. Her work tote wasn't sitting the way she had left it that morning. The zipper was undone, though Olivia distinctly remembered zipping it up before heading out. A folder containing contracts was sticking out of an interior pocket at an awkward angle. Voices drifted from the kitchen. Her husband, Vance, and his mother, Zelda, were discussing something, their voices occasionally rising before hushing again. Olivia slipped off her heels and walked silently down the hallway. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. Her makeup bag on the vanity had been moved. Her hand cream was not in its usual spot. The closet door wasn't shut tightly, though she was always meticulous about it. They had been rummaging through her things. But why? Olivia backed out into the entryway and loudly slammed the front door, pretending she had just walked in. The voices in the kitchen instantly ceased. When she walked in, Vance was sitting at the table with a mug of tea, his face buried in his phone. Zelda was standing by the stove, stirring something in a pot. It was a picture-perfect, almost theatrical scene. Olivia set her tote on a chair and opened the refrigerator. Everything was in order. The groceries were exactly where she had left them that morning. Strange. Usually, her mother-in-law managed to rearrange everything to her own liking throughout the day, criticize how the jars were organized, and start cooking something that would later require Olivia to scrub the stove and oven for an hour. She poured herself a glass of water, leaned against the counter, and looked at Vance. He stubbornly refused to lift his eyes from his screen. Zelda kept stirring the contents of the pot, though Olivia could clearly see it was just plain water with no signs of actual cooking. So, they were looking for something specific. But what? Documents? Money? Olivia mentally sifted through the contents of her tote and closets. There was nothing criminal, nothing secret. Her employment contract, bank statements, old utility bills. Everything was legal and painfully boring. Her phone buzzed in her blazer pocket. It was the regional director's number. Olivia stepped out into the hallway and answered. George Bennett's voice sounded unusually formal. He asked her to come to his office tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. He didn't explain the reason, but from his tone, Olivia gathered it wasn't a reprimand or a layoff, it was something else. She confirmed she would be there, said goodbye, and returned to the kitchen. Vance was now watching her with undisguised curiosity. Zelda had also turned away from the stove. Olivia walked past them in silence, went into the bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. Let them guess. Let them sweat. She herself didn't fully understand what was happening yet. The next morning, Olivia woke up half an hour earlier than usual. She chose a tailored charcoal gray suit, a crisp white blouse, low-heeled pumps, minimal jewelry, and a muted lipstick. A professional look for an important meeting. Vance was still asleep, sprawled across the entire bed. Zelda was already bustling about the kitchen, having brewed herself coffee from an expensive bag of artisanal beans Olivia had bought 3 days ago and hadn't even opened yet. Her mother-in-law pretended not to notice her, demonstratively flipping through a magazine. Olivia grabbed her bag and left without saying goodbye. In the elevator, she double-checked the documents she might need. Her driver's license, a digital copy of her resume on her phone, her college degree transcripts, she had it all. The office was waking up slowly. Colleagues were sleepily drifting toward the breakroom espresso machine, discussing last night's game and weekend plans. Olivia went to her desk, booted up her computer, and waited. At exactly 9:50, the director's executive assistant peeked into her cubicle and nodded. Inside George Bennett's spacious corner office sat the chief financial officer, Laura Ives, and the company's general counsel, Andrew Simmons. Olivia greeted them and sat in the designated chair, feeling a tight knot of tension in her stomach. George didn't beat around the bush. He announced that the company was expanding, opening a new division, and they needed someone for the position of Director of Administrative Operations. The salary was double Olivia's current pay, plus quarterly bonuses and a premium executive benefits package. All three executives looked at her expectantly. Olivia couldn't find her voice right away. She had been with the company for 6 years, starting out as an entry-level specialist. She had steadily grown, taking on more and more responsibilities, but an executive-level role that was a different tier, bringing entirely new responsibilities and opportunities. Laura Ives chimed in, noting that Olivia had proven herself to be a highly reliable employee who knew how to manage contracts, handle people, and keep her cool in high-stakes situations. That was exactly the kind of person they needed for this role. Olivia exhaled slowly and accepted. George Bennett nodded approvingly. Andrew Simmons slid a folder containing her new employment contract across the desk for her review. She would officially assume the role in a week, after signing the paperwork and handing off her current duties. Walking out of the CEO's office, Olivia went straight to the restroom, locked herself in a stall, and pressed her forehead against the cool tile wall. Director of Operations. A salary that would finally allow her to stop counting every penny before payday. The authority to make decisions, not just execute the orders of others. It was real. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Colleagues asked her questions. She answered on autopilot while continuing to process her daily paperwork. By late afternoon, news of her promotion had already rippled through the office floor, judging by the sideways glances and whispers behind her back. Some were jealous, some were genuinely happy for her, some couldn't believe it. Leaving work, Olivia stopped at a high-end gourmet supermarket. She strolled through the aisles, putting things into her cart that she usually avoided due to the price tags. Smoked Pacific salmon, jumbo tiger prawns, expensive blue cheese, imported prosciutto, out-of-season fresh strawberries, a bottle of Spanish wine she had read about in a magazine, a decadent chocolate cake from the store's bakery, artisan Italian pasta, and a jar of sauce that cost 3 times the normal amount. At the register, the total was substantial. Olivia swiped her credit card without flinching. Previously, an expense like this would have forced her to pack a sad lunch for a week to make up the difference. Now, everything was going to change. She carried the heavy paper bags to her car, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of lightness. Freedom begins the moment you stop fearing price tags. When she got home, she shoved the lobby door open with her shoulder, balancing the bags. The elevator, as usual, was out of service. Olivia slowly trudged up to the 4th floor, pausing on the landings to catch her breath. At the door of her condo, she pulled out her keys and froze. Voices were coming from inside, not just voices' laughter. Vance's booming, raucous laugh, and his mother's shrill cackle. Olivia unlocked the door and stepped inside. A pair of unfamiliar, scuffed men's work boots were kicked off in the entryway. An unfamiliar jacket hung on the coat rack. Guests. She walked into the kitchen and set the bags on the island. Zelda's voice drifted from the living room, addressing someone Olivia couldn't see. Olivia began unpacking her haul, laying the groceries out on the counter. She pulled the refrigerator open and started clearing space on the shelves. Vance strolled into the kitchen, holding a can of cheap beer. He was followed by his mother and 2 other people, a man and a woman around their age. Vance's co-workers from the construction site. Judging by their clothes and demeanor, Vance stopped, eyed the high-end grocery bags, and let out a low whistle. Zelda immediately pushed past them to inspect the haul. She pulled out the jumbo prawns, turning the package over in her hands. The female guest, a slightly overweight woman with badly dyed hair, giggled. Olivia recognized her. It was Linda from their company's finance department. So, everyone already knew about the promotion. Linda lived for office gossip, and the fact that she was here meant nothing good. Zelda pulled out the bottle of wine, evaluated the label, and then grabbed the cake. Vance was already tearing open the smoked salmon, tossing pieces directly into his mouth. His buddy reached for the prawns. Olivia stood by the counter, watching as her celebratory feast was dismantled without asking and without a single word of thanks. Linda was running her mouth about the promotion. Zelda snorted dismissively. Vance just laughed. It never even crossed their minds to invite her to join them. They simply grabbed the food and hauled it into the living room, where cheap paper plates and beer glasses were already scattered across the coffee table. Olivia was left alone in the kitchen. From the living room came the sounds of loud voices, loud chewing, and clinking glasses. They were discussing her promotion. Linda was dishing out the details, embellishing the story and adding things that never happened. Vance made snide comments. His mother interjected with her own snarky remarks. They were all laughing. Olivia sat down on a bar stool, staring at the empty grocery bags. She had bought all of this to celebrate her success. to share her joy with her family. Instead, her achievement had been turned into the butt of a joke, and her celebratory dinner was reduced to bar snacks for beer and Monday Night Football. She pulled out her phone and opened her contacts. She found the number for Megan, her old college roommate who now worked as a corporate attorney at a private firm. She typed out a quick text asking for a consultation. Then she pulled up the contact for Ian, a family law attorney she knew. Another text, and a third text went to Sarah from a corporate recruiting agency. All three replied quickly. Megan offered to meet for lunch tomorrow. Ian texted that he could fit her in the day after tomorrow. Sarah asked what was going on. Olivia replied vaguely, saying she just wanted to clarify some career options. A loud roar of laughter erupted from the living room. Vance yelled something about a touchdown. Zelda clapped. Olivia stood up, walked out of the kitchen, and went into the master bedroom. She shut the door, turned on the bedside lamp, and lay down on top of the comforter without changing her clothes. Her phone rested on the pillow next to her. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the party through the drywall. They hadn't even noticed she was gone. They hadn't called her in, hadn't asked how her day went. They didn't care about her joy, her success, or her feelings. 6 years ago, Olivia met Vance at a corporate retreat. He worked as a site foreman for a construction project their company was managing. Tall, athletic, with a confident smile and an easygoing nature. He knew how to be charming when he wanted to be. He courted her beautifully, took her to nice restaurants, bought her flowers. He seemed reliable. They got married quickly. Vance insisted, saying he saw no point in waiting. Olivia agreed, even though a tiny voice inside her whispered, "Don't rush." But she brushed the doubts aside. It felt like fate. At the wedding, Zelda behaved perfectly, even sweetly. She gave nice gifts, showered Olivia with compliments, and called her daughter. And then, 2 years ago, she became a widow and suddenly decided to move in with her son. Vance didn't even consult his wife. He just presented it as a done deal. From that moment on, life turned into an endless series of petty humiliations. Snide comments about her housekeeping, critiques of her cooking, complaints about her appearance. Zelda gradually commandeered the kitchen, the bathroom, the living room. Olivia was left with only the master bedroom. And even then, her mother-in-law frequently barged in without knocking, claiming she forgot something or was dropping off clean laundry. Vance never defended her. He'd say his mother was elderly, lonely, and that Olivia needed to be more understanding. But slowly, Vance adopted his mother's way of speaking to his wife. He became sharp, demanding, and dismissive. At first, Olivia tried talking to him, but eventually, she gave up. There's no point in explaining things to someone who refuses to listen. She got up from the bed and walked over to her closet. From the top shelf, she pulled down an old shoebox. Inside were her vital documents: her marriage certificate, her passport, her college diplomas, and another document printed on heavy, watermarked paper. The property deed, issued in the name of Olivia Carter 8 years ago when she inherited the condo after her grandmother passed away. This apartment belonged to her and her alone. Vance had moved in after the wedding as her spouse, but legally, he had zero claim to the property. They hadn't signed a prenuptial agreement. At the time, Vance had laughed it off, saying, "Why do we need all that legal red tape? We love each other." Olivia placed the deed back in the box, put it away, and lay down again. Voices still echoed from the living room. The game was over. By the sounds of it, the guests were getting ready to leave. The front door slammed. Then came the heavy footsteps of Vance and his mother in the hallway. They walked right past the bedroom, without even knocking to check on her. Olivia heard Vance step into the bathroom, run the water, and then flop down onto the living room sofa. Zelda rattled dishes in the kitchen, undoubtedly leaving the mess to sit overnight. Olivia sat up, quietly cracked the door open, and peeked out. The lights in the living room were off. Vance had passed out on the sofa, not even bothering to stumble to the bedroom. In the kitchen, Zelda finished whatever she was doing and retreated to her room. The door shut to the guest room, the room Olivia had once planned to turn into a home office. The condo descended into silence. Olivia went back into her room, switched on the desk lamp, and pulled out her laptop. She opened the encrypted folder containing her scanned documents. The marriage certificate, IDs, all the real estate paperwork. Everything was there. Everything was in order. She created a new folder on her desktop, named it simply with today's date, and methodically began copying the files into it. Then, she opened her browser and started researching the legal intricacies of divorce in her state, division of assets, The eviction process for a non-tenant ex-spouse and their family members. Timelines, procedures, legal loopholes. She read carefully, taking screenshots of crucial paragraphs and bookmarking links to state legal statutes. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 3. Outside the window, the city was pitch black. From the living room came the sound of Vance's heavy snoring. Olivia opened a Word document and began drafting a step-by-step plan, detailed, with specific deadlines and actionable items. First step, consult with the attorney to clarify the legal nuances. Then, get the necessary document copies notarized. Simultaneously, gather an evidence file in case things went to civil court. Next step, the divorce. In her state, she could file a petition for dissolution of marriage unilaterally. It would take a few months to finalize, assuming Vance didn't contest it. If he did contest it, it would take a bit longer, but the outcome would be the same. Third step, eviction. The condo was her sole and separate property. There was no prenup, and he wasn't on the deed or the mortgage. That meant Vance had no legal claim to it. She could have him formally evicted through the courts. The timeline was roughly 30 to 60 days, accounting for the legal notice period. Zelda was also subject to eviction, as she was technically just a guest and would hold no legal relation once the divorce was filed. Olivia saved the document, closed the laptop, and glanced at the clock. It was 4:30 inches the morning. She had to be up for work in less than 3 hours. She lay down, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind raced with thoughts, contingencies, and scenarios. For the first time in years, Olivia didn't feel a sense of crushing helplessness, but a cold, razor-sharp confidence. She knew exactly what to do. She knew exactly how to execute it. And most importantly, she was no longer afraid of the fallout. She had nothing left to lose. She had lost her husband's and mother-in-law's respect a long time ago, assuming it had ever existed. Whatever love there was had evaporated in the daily grind of mockery and belittlement. All that remained was her freedom, and Olivia fully intended to take it back, whatever the cost. Outside, the sky began to lighten. Down on the street, a car engine turned over. A building door clicked shut. The city was waking up. Olivia closed her eyes, knowing that in a few hours, a new day would begin. The day when everything changed. Vance and Zelda didn't know it yet. They were sleeping soundly, utterly convinced they were in control of the situation. But the control had shifted a long time ago. They just hadn't realized it yet. Olivia finally drifted into a short, dreamless sleep. And in the next room, snoring on the couch, Vance had no idea that this was the very last night he would spend in this condo as its master. The alarm went off at 6 a.m. Olivia shut it off and stood up, not feeling the slightest bit of fatigue despite only getting a couple of hours of rest. Her body was running on pure adrenaline and cold resolve. She walked into the master bathroom, locked the door, and stood under the scalding shower for a long time. The water washed away the last lingering remnants of doubt. By the time she stepped out, wrapped in a plush robe, her plan of attack was finalized. Olivia went back into the bedroom and opened her closet. She pulled out a severe, charcoal black suit, a tailored white button-down, and black stiletto pumps. Minimal jewelry, a thin gold chain, small diamond stud earrings, a classic watch. She pulled her hair back into a sleek, low bun. Her makeup was subtle, drawing attention to her sharp eyes. It was the strict, professional look of a high-level executive. She grabbed her leather tote and walked out of the bedroom. The apartment was dead silent. Vance was still snoring on the sofa. Zelda hadn't woken up yet. Olivia walked to the kitchen and froze in the doorway. The kitchen island was buried in dirty dishes. Paper plates covered in half-eaten food, wine glasses stained with red rings, forks, knives, crumpled napkins. Breadcrumbs and a crushed shrimp tail littered the hardwood floor. The smell of sour wine mixed with the stench of day-old seafood. The trash can was overflowing to the point that the lid wouldn't close. Olivia opened the refrigerator. Absolute emptiness. Every shelf had been picked clean, as if they'd been vacuumed. No jumbo prawns, no smoked salmon, no imported cheese. Even the strawberries had vanished. Only the empty plastic container from the bakery cake sat on the bottom shelf. She took out her phone and methodically photographed the kitchen. Wide shots. Close-ups of the ruined counter. The open, empty fridge. The overflowing trash. Every picture was in sharp focus with the flash on. Then, she photographed the grocery receipts she had saved in her purse. The date, the time, the total amount, the itemized list of premium foods. She emailed all the photos to herself and backed them up to her secure cloud drive. Let there be a permanent digital record. Olivia closed the fridge, grabbed her tote, and walked out the front door. No cooking breakfast, no cleaning up. Let them wallow in their own mess. She arrived at the corporate office half an hour early. The floor was still deserted. Only the security guard was dozing at the front lobby desk. Olivia walked into her cubicle, booted up her computer, and waited. At exactly 9 a.m., there was a knock on her cubicle wall. The executive assistant informed her that there was an all-hands meeting in the main conference room in 15 minutes. The official introduction of the new department head. Olivia grabbed her leather portfolio and a pen, checking herself in the compact mirror she kept in her desk drawer. Everything was flawless. A calm face, perfect posture, an unwavering gaze. The main conference room was packed. Employees from every department had gathered, some looking curious, others skeptical. Olivia took her seat next to George Bennett. The CEO stood up and tapped his pen against a glass to command attention. George gave a brief speech about the company's Q3 growth, upcoming strategic targets, and the necessity of a highly efficient operations department. Then, he formally introduced Olivia as the new Director of Administrative Operations, rattling off her achievements and track record over her 6 years with the firm. Polite applause rippled through the room, not overly enthusiastic, but appropriately professional. Laura Ives stood up and handed Olivia a bouquet of corporate-branded flowers. Andrew Simmons shook her hand, congratulating her in his rigid, lawyerly tone. Olivia gave a brief, gracious speech thanking them for the opportunity and promising to exceed their expectations, then took her seat. The meeting transitioned into a rundown of current quarter projects. She listened with hyper-focus, taking notes, memorizing names, titles, and project scopes. After the meeting wrapped, colleagues approached her. Some offered genuine congratulations. Others offered stiff corporate pleasantries. Linda from finance glared at her from under her brow and walked away without saying a word. Olivia wasn't offended. She knew perfectly well that corporate environments bred resentment. By 11 a.m., she moved into her new office. It was vastly larger than her cubicle, a heavy mahogany desk, an ergonomic executive chair, locked filing cabinets, and a dual monitor setup. A stack of manila folders marked incoming already sat in her inbox. Olivia sat down, logged into the system, and launched the company's internal HR and operations database. She now possessed top-tier administrative access to all personnel files, employee records, employment contracts, disciplinary write-ups, bonus structures, PTO requests. She typed a name into the search bar. Thompson, Vance. The system pulled up his personnel file. She clicked it open and began to read. Site foreman. Sector 3. 7 years at the company. Associate degree. Salary sitting just above the median for his role. 3 modest pay bumps over his tenure. On the surface, it looked completely standard. But then it got interesting. The section detailing his disciplinary infractions spanned 4 pages. Olivia scrolled down, reading the HR notes. Late arrival to job site. Verbal warning. Late arrival. Written warning. Altercation with subcontractor. Written warning. Failure to meet project deadlines. Final written warning. OSHA safety violation. Severe reprimand. Placed in permanent file. Client complaint regarding unprofessional conduct. The HR note added. Behavior worsening over time. Olivia reached the most recent entries and froze. 3 months ago, an internal audit had triggered an official investigation. The project developer had reported a massive discrepancy. $30,000 worth of construction materials were missing from the site. Suspicion fell squarely on the site foreman. Vance. An audit was launched, inventory was seized, witnesses were questioned. And then, the file went dead. At the bottom of the page was an executive override from George Bennett. Investigation suspended due to employees' extenuating family circumstances. Missing inventory written off as operational shrinkage. Employee given a final zero-tolerance warning. Olivia leaned back in her leather chair. Extenuating family circumstances. That was her. She was the circumstance. The C-suite knew Vance was married to one of their most reliable corporate employees, and they had covered for him. They swept a potential felony under the rug to avoid creating friction in the corporate office, which meant Vance should have been fired and potentially arrested 3 months ago. But he was saved entirely because he was married to Olivia. The irony was staggering. She kept digging through the digital files. She found an email chain between George Bennett and the VP of construction. The VP was begging to fire Vance. Chronic policy violations, toxic behavior with the crew, gross negligence. He requested immediate termination for cause. The CEO had denied it, citing delicate internal optics regarding his wife. Olivia closed the PDF and sat in silence. Vance had been dangling over the edge of termination for over a year. He only had a paycheck because of her reputation. And she hadn't known a thing. He had kept his mouth shut, swaggering around the condo, acting like he was a godsend to the construction industry and the star of the company. A sharp knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Olivia looked up. Standing in the doorway was a woman in her 50s, wearing a sharp navy suit, her silver hair pulled back into a flawless French twist. It was Valerie Smith, her predecessor as director of operations. Olivia invited her to sit down. Valerie took the guest chair and placed a thick binder on the desk. The older woman began methodically explaining the department's hierarchy, the distribution of vendor contracts, and the intricacies of dealing with various department heads. Olivia listened intently, asking sharp, targeted questions. Valerie spoke calmly and professionally, but suddenly, she paused, looked Olivia dead in the eye, and lowered her voice. She stated bluntly that the company was carrying dead-weight employees who were kept on the payroll not because of their skills, but for other reasons: nepotism, executive favoritism, or outdated loyalties. Those people get lazy, they become toxic, and they create massive liabilities for the firm. Olivia nodded slowly, understanding exactly where this conversation was heading. Valerie didn't name any names, but the implication was blindingly obvious. Valerie then leaned forward and added that Olivia was the director now. Her sole mandate was to protect the company's liability and bottom line. Personal sympathies and family ties could absolutely not factor into her decisions. If an employee was a liability, they needed to be cut. If they violated policy, they had to face the consequences, or the entire corporate structure would rot from the inside out. Olivia thanked her for her candor. Valerie stood up, wished her luck, and walked out. Left alone, Olivia reopened Vance's HR file. She read every single entry again. She memorized the dates, the monetary amounts, the specific HR codes. The picture it painted was ugly. Her husband was a massive corporate liability who was only kept on the payroll out of respect for her. She closed the laptop and looked out the floor-to-ceiling window. Clouds drifted over the city skyline. Below, traffic crawled along the concrete grid. An ordinary day in an ordinary American city. But inside her life, a silent coup was taking place. Olivia pulled out her phone and texted Megan, her lawyer friend. Megan replied instantly, confirming a lunch meeting for tomorrow. Then Olivia texted Ian, the family attorney. He confirmed an appointment for the day after. Everything was tracking perfectly. All she had to do was wait for the evening. The workday crawled by. Olivia authorized incoming expense reports, familiarized herself with active vendor accounts, and held brief one-on-ones with her new direct reports. By 5 p.m., her brain was buzzing with new information, but she held her composure. Showing weakness on day one was not an option. At 7 p.m., she packed up her tote and drove home. On the way, she stopped at a different, cheaper grocery store. She bought only the absolute bare minimum: a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, a dozen eggs, some salad greens. No luxury items. Just enough for her to survive the next 2 days. Walking down the hallway to her door, Olivia could already hear the noise. Loud, obnoxious laughter. The entourage was back. She unlocked the door and saw the same scuffed boots in the entryway. Olivia stepped inside, closing the door behind her. From the living room, Zelda's voice boomed, loud and mocking. "Look who's here. The big boss has arrived." The room erupted. Vance laughed so hard he started coughing. Someone else joined in. It was a chorus of pure mockery. Olivia walked over to the living room archway and looked in. Vance, Zelda, and yesterday's guest Linda from finance and her husband were lounging on the furniture. The coffee table was littered with cheap domestic beer bottles, greasy potato chips, pretzels, and spilled wine. The massive flat screen was blaring some reality TV show, but no one was watching it. They were all staring at her. Zelda was wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. Vance took a swig of beer, smirking. Linda giggled, pressing a hand over her mouth. "So, how is it up there on the throne?" Vance puffed out his chest, mocking a posture of authority. "Giving out orders to the peasants?" Another wave of laughter. Linda's husband made a derogatory comment about women in leadership roles. Zelda nodded vigorously in agreement. Olivia silently turned on her heel and walked into the kitchen. Behind her, they kept laughing, making crude jokes, and passing around new insults about her promotion. The kitchen was a biohazard. Dirty dishes were piled high in the sink and across the quartz counters. Crusts of food, rings of sticky wine, cigarette butts floating in a bowl even though Olivia strictly banned smoking indoors. The refrigerator door was cracked open. Inside, it was completely barren. Just days ago, she had spent hundreds of dollars stocking it. Now, there was absolutely nothing left. She placed her plastic grocery bags on the counter and began putting away the milk and eggs. Zelda waddled into the kitchen, peered at the pathetic groceries, and pursed her lips in disgust. Her mother-in-law announced that since Olivia was now making a massive executive salary, she was expected to buy all the groceries and pay all the household bills. Vance works a grueling physical job, she declared. He needs his paycheck for his own spending money. A man needs to feel financially free, not waste his hard-earned cash on boring utility bills. Olivia listened in complete silence. Zelda's rant picked up momentum, listing off everything Olivia was now financially responsible for. The HOA fees, the electricity, the gas, the water, the gigabit internet, the cell phone plans, the groceries, obviously, and all the household supplies. Vance appeared in the doorway, leaning lazily against the frame. He nodded, backing up his mother. He claimed it was only fair. Olivia was a fancy corporate boss now. She had the cash, so she should invest in the household, while he would use his construction wages on himself. Maybe he'd finance a new truck, or finally take the boys on a proper Vegas weekend. Olivia looked at both of them. Her face was perfectly blank, completely devoid of emotion. Then, she nodded. She said she agreed. She would handle all the bills herself. Not a problem. Vance could spend his paycheck however he saw fit. Zelda and Vance exchanged a look, clearly stunned by how easily they had won. Her mother-in-law flashed a triumphant, nasty smile. Vance slapped the doorframe, called Olivia a good girl, and swaggered back into the living room. Olivia went back to putting her eggs in the fridge. Zelda lingered for a moment to gloat, then followed her son. From the living room, the clinking of bottles and laughter resumed. They were toasting to their brilliant financial victory. Olivia unzipped her leather tote and pulled out the heavy manila folder she had packed that morning. The notarized property deed, the marriage certificate, the copies of their IDs. Everything was meticulously organized, legally certified, and ready for deployment. She slipped the folder back into her bag, walked into the master bedroom, changed into sweatpants, lay down on the bed, and opened a paperback thriller. She couldn't actually read the words her mind was racing, but she held the book up, playing the part of a woman engrossed in a novel. From the living room, the noise of the guests dragged on. They stayed late, arguing loudly about sports, laughing, and clinking glass. Finally, around 11 p.m., the front door clicked shut. The guests were gone. Olivia heard Vance's heavy boots thudding down the hallway. He went into the bathroom, and the shower turned on. Zelda was banging pots around in the kitchen, inevitably making a bigger mess to leave for the morning. Vance took a long shower, finally walked out, entered the bedroom, and collapsed onto the mattress next to Olivia. He reeked of cheap beer and stale cigarette smoke. He mumbled something incoherent about being tired and passed out. Olivia waited until his breathing shifted into a heavy, rhythmic snore. She quietly got up, wrapped herself in her robe, and walked out. In the kitchen, Zelda was polishing off a bag of potato chips while flipping through a tabloid. Seeing her daughter-in-law, she scowled. Olivia walked over to the kitchen island, sat on a stool directly across from her mother-in-law, looked her dead in the eye, and spoke in a flat, clinical tone. She informed Zelda that she had until 10 a.m. tomorrow to vacate the guest room. A moving crew would be arriving to haul her belongings away. Zelda slowly lowered her magazine. She stared at Olivia, and then let out a loud, obnoxious bark of laughter. She asked if her daughter-in-law had finally lost her mind. Olivia didn't smile. She reached into the pocket of her robe, pulled out a folded piece of heavy paper, unfolded it, and slid it across the counter. The official county property deed, registered 8 years ago to Olivia Carter. Stamped, signed, and embossed with the county seal. She explained it shortly and clearly. The condo was hers. Legally, entirely hers. Vance had moved in after the wedding, but he had zero equity and no name on the mortgage or deed. There was no prenuptial agreement granting him rights to her premarital assets. Zelda was living here with absolutely no legal standing, merely as an unauthorized guest invited by a non-owner. Zelda had her own apartment across town. It was time for her to go back to it. The color completely drained from Zelda's face. She snatched up the deed, her eyes frantically darting across the legal jargon, tracing the lines with a trembling finger. Then she violently shoved the paper away and jumped to her feet. She began screaming that this was illegal, that Olivia had no right, that Vance was going to come out here and put a stop to this. She lunged toward the hallway, threw open the master bedroom door, and started violently shaking her son by the shoulder. Vance woke up, sitting up in a daze, completely disoriented. His mother grabbed him by the arm and practically dragged him out of the bedroom. He stumbled into the hallway, yawning, wearing only boxers and a t-shirt, barefoot and groggy. Zelda shoved the property deed directly into his face, pointing a shaking finger at Olivia. Vance grabbed the paper, squinting, trying to read the fine print in the dim hallway light. Olivia flicked on the bright overhead lights. Vance stared at the document again. His face went slack. He asked what the hell this was supposed to mean. Olivia answered in that same deadpan voice. It meant the condo was hers. His mother was being evicted tomorrow. And as for his own living situation, that issue would be resolved tomorrow morning at the corporate office. Vance blinked in confusion, asking what the hell she meant by work. Olivia simply repeated, "You'll find out tomorrow morning at work." She turned around and walked into the master bedroom. She pulled the door shut and locked the deadbolt. On the other side of the door, a nuclear meltdown commenced. Vance pounded his fists against the wood, demanding she open the door, demanding an explanation. Zelda was shrieking, calling Olivia a heartless, ungrateful bitch, cursing her to hell and back. Olivia lay down on the bed, placed her phone on the nightstand, and hit the voice memo record button. Let all their threats and verbal abuse be digitally archived. It would be highly useful for the judge during the eviction hearing. The screaming and pounding lasted for about 20 minutes. Then it died down. She heard footsteps stomping away, and the door to Zelda's room slammed shut. Then, silence. Olivia stopped the recording, uploaded the audio file to her secure cloud drive, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow was going to be brutal, but she was ready. More than ready. Sleep overtook her surprisingly fast. A deep, heavy sleep without a single dream. Her body was banking energy for the day of reckoning. In the next room, however, Zelda was wide awake. She sat on the edge of her mattress, frantically dialing number after number. She called her sisters her friends, weaving tales of how her daughter-in-law had turned out to be a venomous snake, begging for advice, fishing for sympathy, boiling with rage. Out in the living room, Vance lay on the sofa. He was desperately trying to put the puzzle pieces together. The condo wasn't his. Fine, but what the hell did work have to do with it? What did Olivia mean when she threatened him about tomorrow morning? He grabbed his phone and tried to call her, but quickly changed his mind. His number was blocked anyway. Texting was pointless. The messages wouldn't deliver. Vance squeezed his eyes shut, trying to force himself to sleep, but the adrenaline kept him awake. His mind spun with increasingly dark scenarios. Something had gone wrong. Horribly wrong. And tomorrow he was going to find out exactly how bad it was. The alarm chimed at 6:30 a.m. Olivia turned it off and sat up. Outside, the sky was just beginning to turn gray. The condo was dead quiet. Only the faint sound of Zelda snoring echoed from the back bedroom. Olivia walked into the master bath, splashed ice-cold water on her face, and meticulously got ready. A tailored navy power suit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back into an uncompromising bun. A purely corporate aesthetic. Today was execution day. She walked back into the bedroom, picked up her phone, and dialed a saved number. A dispatcher answered immediately. Olivia confirmed the booking for 10 a.m., verified the address, and confirmed the head count. 3 professional movers, 1 box truck, a 2-hour minimum block, paid in full via credit card. Hanging up, she packed her leather tote with her documents, her laptop, and her case files. Business as usual, except inside. Her blood was running ice cold. In the hallway, Vance appeared. He looked like a wreck rumpled t-shirt, sweatpants, bloodshot eyes, and a swollen face. He physically blocked her path, crossing his thick arms over his chest. Vance demanded an immediate explanation. He wanted to know what that psycho stunt last night was about, what the deed meant, and what the hell she was threatening him with regarding work. Olivia sidestepped him, moving smoothly toward the front door. "We will discuss it at work. I have an executive briefing at 9 a.m. Vance grabbed her hard by the shoulder, spinning her back around. Olivia calmly reached up, peeled his fingers off her jacket, and looked him dead in the eyes. Her gaze was absolute zero. "Take your hands off me. Now." Her tone was so violently calm that Vance actually took a step back. Olivia walked out the front door, locked it, and took the stairs down to the garage. She got into her sedan and fired up the ignition. In her rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of her fourth-floor window. Vance was standing there, staring down at her car. Let him look. Olivia arrived at the corporate campus half an hour early. The parking lot was mostly empty. She took the elevator up, walked into her corner office, booted up her dual monitors, and laid out her files. The complete HR dossier of Thompson, Vance. Printouts of his 7 disciplinary write-ups. Copies of the subcontractor complaints. The suspended $30,000 internal theft investigation. At exactly 8:45 a.m., she picked up her desk phone and called the CEO's executive assistant, requesting an emergency closed-door meeting with George Bennett and Andrew Simmons. Subject is highly sensitive personnel termination. At 9 a.m. sharp, she walked into the CEO's office. George and the general counsel were already waiting at the conference table. Olivia sat down, unclasped her portfolio, spread the documents across the mahogany table, and began speaking. Calmly, professionally. The site foreman for Sector 3, Vance Thompson, has accumulated a critical mass of HR infractions. Chronic tardiness, insubordination with subcontractors and clients, failure to meet project deliverables, and gross OSHA safety violations. Furthermore, 3 months ago, an internal audit regarding $30,000 in stolen site materials was suspended. The official reason listed was extenuating family circumstances. Those circumstances are no longer applicable. Olivia looked up, meeting the CEO's eyes. George Bennett was listening in dead silence. Andrew Simmons was rapidly scanning the documents, nodding as he absorbed the legal liability. She continued. According to Section 7 of the Employee Handbook, as well as standard at-will employment laws in this state, accumulating 3 or more severe write-ups within a fiscal year is grounds for immediate termination for cause. Thompson has 7, plus a suspended felony-level theft investigation that I am prepared to reopen. Andrew Simmons tapped his pen against the table. Legally, this is ironclad. We have overwhelming cause for immediate termination. George Bennett leaned back in his leather executive chair, steepling his fingers, and looked at Olivia intently. Olivia, you realize we are talking about your husband, correct? I do. But I am now the director of operations. My sole mandate is to protect the financial and legal interests of this corporation. You promoted me because you trust my judgment and my professionalism. I cannot and will not allow corporate liability to slide because of a familial relationship. The CEO was silent for a long moment. Then, he gave a slow, definitive nod. Andrew Simmons was already typing on his iPad, drafting the official termination notice. Termination of employment for Vance Thompson, effective immediately for gross misconduct and repeated violation of company policy. The document was printed. George Bennett signed it as CEO. Olivia countersigned it as Director of Operations. Andrew stamped it with a legal seal. It was done. All legal protocols had been followed. Vance Thompson was officially fired. Olivia walked back to her office, picked up the phone, and called corporate security. She instructed them to immediately deactivate the RFID badge for Vance Thompson, site foreman. The security director confirmed the deactivation. Now, all that was left to do was wait. Vance pulled his truck into the construction site parking lot around 10 a.m. He parked in his usual foreman's spot, hopped out, and swaggered up to the security turnstile. He tapped his badge against the scanner. A harsh red light flashed. ACCESS denied. He swore, wiped the badge on his jeans, and tapped it again. Red light. Vance turned to the guard shack. The on-duty security officer stepped out, looking down at his tablet. Your credentials have been revoked, Thompson. You are barred from company property. Vance stared at him, bewildered. He demanded to know why. The guard shrugged indifferently. System says you're locked out. Take it up with corporate HR. Vance yanked his phone out of his pocket and dialed Olivia's number. She picked up on the third ring. I'm at the gate. The scanner is locked out. What the hell is going on? Stay right there. I'm coming down. Olivia walked out of the corporate office lobby 3 minutes later, strode up to the perimeter gate, and stopped 3 feet away from Vance. She looked at him as if he were a total stranger. Effective immediately, your employment with this company is terminated. Grounds for dismissal: gross misconduct and chronic violation of company policy. Your official termination packet will be mailed to you by HR. Any personal tools left on the site will be boxed up and shipped to you via courier within 3 business days. Vance stood frozen, his mouth hanging slightly open. Then, he lunged a step forward, grabbing the chain-link fence. Are you out of your psychotic mind? Firing me? I've given 7 years to this company. You had a job for 7 years. Now you don't. Security, please escort this individual off the premises. The security guard unclipped his radio and stepped toward Vance, grabbing him firmly by the bicep. Vance violently jerked his arm away, his face turning purple as he started screaming. Olivia turned on her heel and walked calmly back toward the glass doors of the corporate headquarters. Behind her, Vance was screaming obscenities, threats, and curses. She never once looked back. Returning to her corner office, Olivia shut the heavy wooden door and sank into her chair. Her hands were shaking slightly with pure adrenaline. She curled them into tight fists until the shaking stopped. It was done. The point of no return had been crossed. Her desk phone and cell phone began lighting up simultaneously. Vance, Vance, Vance again. Olivia rejected every call and permanently blocked his number. Half an hour later, there was a knock. Andrew Simmons handed her a finalized copy of the termination file. Everything was legally bulletproof. His final paycheck had been deposited, minus company assets. Olivia thanked him and locked the file in her desk safe. The rest of the workday proceeded flawlessly. Contract reviews, budget meetings, conference calls. Her colleagues gave her wide-eyed, nervous glances, but absolutely no one dared ask a question. The news of Vance's brutal termination had already swept through the corporate grapevine like a wildfire. During the lunch hour, Olivia avoided the corporate cafeteria. She stayed locked in her office, eating a protein bar from her desk drawer. She had no desire to deal with Linda or the rest of the office gossips. At 3 p.m., her phone buzzed with a text from the moving company foreman. Job complete. Belongings of Zelda Thompson have been relocated to the requested address. Client signed a delivery manifest. Olivia opened her banking app and authorized the final payment. That meant Zelda was officially out of her condo. Good. The afternoon dragged on forever. Olivia maintained a mask of total corporate composure. But inside, a storm was brewing. She knew perfectly well what was waiting for her at home. Vance had almost certainly sped straight back to the apartment after being thrown off the job site. At 7 p.m., she packed up her laptop and drove home. She drove precisely the speed limit, mentally preparing herself for the war zone she was about to walk into. Pulling into her assigned parking spot, she saw Vance's lifted truck parked illegally in a fire lane. Olivia locked her car and took the stairs. Even before she reached the 4th floor, she could hear the screaming echoing down the hall. She unlocked her door and pushed it open. The entryway was a disaster zone of cardboard boxes, trash bags, and scattered clothes. In the center of the living room stood Vance and his mother. Zelda was hyperventilating, mascara running down her face in thick black streaks. Vance was screaming into his cell phone, cursing out someone on the other end. Olivia walked right past them. She kicked off her heels, hung her blazer in the closet, and turned around. Vance hurled his phone onto the sofa and spun to face her. You did all this. You psychotic bitch. Olivia unclasped her leather tote, pulled out 2 thick manila envelopes, and held one out toward Vance. This is a formal petition for dissolution of marriage. I filed the paperwork at the county family court this morning. You can hire a lawyer and contest it, or you can sign it. The divorce is happening regardless. Vance snatched the envelope and ripped it in half without even looking at the legal seal. Shredded paper fluttered to the hardwood floor. Olivia calmly held out the second envelope. This is a formal 3-day notice to quit, an eviction notice. The condo is my sole and separate property. The deed is clear. You have exactly 3 days to pack whatever junk you have left and get out. If you are not gone by Friday at 5 p.m., I am calling the sheriff to have you removed for trespassing. And the locks will be changed. You can't do this, Zelda shrieked, clutching her chest. This is highly illegal. We are calling the police right now. Call them, Olivia replied evenly. They will ask for proof of residency, and I will show them the notarized deed proving I am the sole owner. There is no prenuptial agreement granting him equity. And as for you, Mrs. Thompson, you are a guest who has overstayed her welcome. You have your own apartment, which my movers kindly relocated you to this afternoon. Vance took a menacing step toward her. His face was contorted with pure rage. I will destroy you. I will tell everyone what a backstabbing psycho you are. You think anyone at that corporate office is going to respect you after this? You fired your own husband in cold blood. Olivia stared him down, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Go ahead. Tell them. And while you're at it, I'll tell the police about the $30,000 worth of construction materials you embezzled. I'll tell them about the kickbacks you took from the subcontractors and how you stole heavy machinery off the site to fence for cash. Yes, I found the audit files. I have access to everything now. Do you really want me to hand those PDFs over to the district attorney? Vance's face went ghost white. His lips trembled. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. You thought no one knew, Olivia continued smoothly. The internal investigation 3 months ago was only swept under the rug because the CEO didn't want to drag my name through the mud. Because I was your wife. But I am no longer your wife. And if you ever attempt to threaten me, harass me, or damage my property, I will personally reopen that investigation. I have the paper trail. I have the witness statements. A forensic accountant will trace exactly where that inventory went. It's grand larceny. It's a felony. So here's your choice. You pack your bags and leave my property quietly, or you leave in handcuffs. Pick one. Vance stood paralyzed, staring at her as if she were a ghost. Zelda was still sobbing, but she had gone completely silent. Olivia turned her back on them, walked into the master bedroom, locked the deadbolt, and collapsed onto the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling fan. Outside the door, the apartment was dead silent. A few minutes later, heavy footsteps shuffled across the floorboards. The front door opened and slammed shut. She sat up and unlocked her door. The condo was empty. Vance and his mother were gone. Olivia walked slowly through the rooms. The living room was trashed. The kitchen was a biohazard of rotting food and dirty plates. Zelda's former bedroom was entirely bare, save for some trash left on the carpet. Olivia grabbed a heavy-duty trash bag and began to clean. Methodically, without rushing, she threw away the garbage, wiped down the quartz counters with bleach, loaded the dishwasher, and vacuumed the floors. By midnight, the apartment was spotless and smelled of citrus cleaner. She took a hot shower, put on clean pajamas, brewed a cup of herbal tea, and sat at the kitchen island, staring out the window. Down on the street, a lifted truck drove by. Maybe it was Vance's. Maybe it was just her imagination. Her phone sat silently on the counter. Olivia checked to make sure she hadn't accidentally unblocked them. Nope, the blocks were active. Vance was just staying quiet, processing the sheer magnitude of how badly he had been outplayed. She went to bed late, but the moment her head hit the pillow, she fell asleep. It was the first peaceful night she had experienced in over a week. She woke up the next morning to absolute, uninterrupted silence. No snoring mother-in-law. No heavy boots stomping down the hall. No screaming into a cell phone about football odds. Olivia got out of bed. She cooked a quiet breakfast, pour-over coffee, a French omelet, sourdough toast. She sat at the pristine island, eating slowly while scrolling through the Wall Street Journal on her iPad. After breakfast, she got dressed and drove to the corporate office. The day proceeded with absolute normalcy. Executive briefings, contract approvals, strategic decisions. Colleagues congratulated her on a stellar first week in the new role. Absolutely no one mentioned Vance. Only Linda from finance crossed paths with her in the hallway, hissing through her teeth that she was a cold-blooded snake. Olivia simply shrugged and kept walking. On the third day, Vance returned to collect the rest of his things. Olivia had strategically taken a PTO day. She unlocked the front door and stepped aside to let him in. He walked into the bedroom and began violently shoving his clothes, shoes, and personal electronics into duffel bags. He didn't say a word. Olivia remained silent as well, simply leaning against the doorframe, watching him pack to ensure he didn't take anything that wasn't his. Vance hauled the bags down to his truck, came back for a second load, then a third. Finally, he was done. He stopped in the doorway, glaring at her with venomous hatred. You're going to regret this. Olivia didn't reply. She simply closed the door in his face, threw the deadbolt, and fastened the security chain. An hour later, a locksmith she had booked in advance arrived. He completely swapped out the deadbolts on the front door and the master bedroom door, handing Olivia 3 sets of freshly cut keys. She paid him via Venmo and saw him out. The condo was finally, entirely, securely hers. The following weeks settled into a quiet, predictable rhythm. Work, home, work. Olivia was slowly remembering how to live alone. She woke up naturally before her alarm, cooked breakfast for one, and drank her coffee in absolute silence. She came home to a pristine apartment where no one left dirty boots on the rug, no one screamed over the TV, and no one criticized her every breath. At the corporate office, the shockwaves eventually died down. Some people secretly despised her for her perceived ruthlessness. Others were terrified and deeply respectful of her boundaries. She paid no attention to either camp. Vance tried desperately to find another foreman gig. He applied to every major construction firm in the county and was universally rejected. HR departments conducting background checks received strictly neutral, liability-free verifications of his employment dates, with not eligible for rehires stamped on his file. The rumors regarding the real reason for his termination had spread through the local contractors' union like a plague. Zelda returned to her dingy apartment across town and relentlessly bombarded Olivia's phone. Massive walls of text, hysterical voicemails, biblical curses, and empty legal threats. Olivia didn't read a single one. She just mass deleted them. Extended family members crawled out of the woodwork. Vance's sister called, screaming into the phone that Olivia had destroyed a sacred family. Even Olivia's own mother called. Her voice trembled with outdated, conservative outrage. How could you do something so drastic to your husband? What are the neighbors going to say? How can you show your face in public? Olivia calmly replied that she had excised a cancer from her life. Then she hung up. A week passed. Then another. Life carved out a new, stable groove. It was Friday evening, and Olivia was sitting at her kitchen island with a glass of red wine. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the city skyline in shades of bruised purple and gold. Her iPhone lay face up on the marble counter. The lock screen was cluttered with missed call notifications. Vance, 4 missed calls today alone. She hadn't answered. Zelda, 3 blocked voicemails. Olivia hadn't bothered to check the transcriptions. Vance's sister, another unhinged Facebook message threatening karma. A distant aunt demanding she come to her senses and take Vance back. Olivia finished her wine, opened her phone settings, and permanently blocked every single one of their numbers, social media accounts, and email addresses. One by one. Total blackout. Absolute silence. Her condo was immaculate. Her refrigerator was stocked with expensive food that only she would eat. No one would steal her imported cheese. No one would drain her coffee beans. No one would move her things. Freedom. Yet, strangely, she didn't feel a surge of euphoric joy. Just a bone-deep exhaustion and a vast, echoing emptiness. Olivia walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. Down below, a car drove past, its headlights cutting through the dusk. The city ground on, completely indifferent to her personal apocalypse. She knew the road ahead was still ugly. A protracted, bureaucratic divorce in the family courts. The agonizing division of whatever minor shared assets existed. The vicious corporate gossip that would trail her for months. The quiet judgment of friends, relatives, and strangers. She would forever be branded as the Ice Queen, the ruthless bitch who fired her own husband and threw him out onto the street. It wasn't exactly great for her long-term corporate trajectory, either. An executive who terminates their spouse is always going to be viewed as a volatile wild card. George Bennett looked at her differently now, with undeniable respect, but also with deep-seated caution. Was it worth it? Olivia walked back to the counter and flipped open her MacBook. Her browser was open to LinkedIn. She slowly scrolled through executive job postings. Vice President of Operations in Chicago. Director of HR in Austin. Chief Operating Officer for a tech startup in New York. Maybe it was time to wipe the slate completely clean, to liquidate the condo, pack up, and move to a city where nobody knew her history, where she could just exist and work without constantly looking over her shoulder. She bookmarked a few high-salary listings, not to apply tonight, but just to keep her options open. Her phone buzzed against the marble. Olivia glanced at the screen. Unknown caller ID. She accepted the call and lifted it to her ear. "You're going to pay for this, you bitch." It was Vance. His voice was raspy, slurred with alcohol, and dripping with venom. "You think you won? You think you can just erase me? I'll find a way to break you." Olivia didn't say a word. She tapped the red end call button, blocked the unknown number, flipped the phone to Do Not Disturb, and set it face down on the counter. She stood up, walked back to the window, and stared at her own reflection in the dark glass. A tired face. Dark circles under her sharp eyes. A tight, uncompromising jawline. This was not the naive young woman who had walked down the aisle 6 years ago. This woman was harder, colder. Was she better? Worse? She honestly didn't know. Olivia switched off the kitchen pendant lights, walked into the master bedroom, and slid into the cold, crisp sheets. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the heavy, luxurious silence of the empty apartment. Freedom is never free. She had bought hers with her reputation, her family ties, and her peace of mind. But did she regret it? No, not for a single second. Because for the first time in 6 years, she could breathe. She could make her own choices. She could live her life entirely on her own terms, free from the parasitic weight of Vance and his mother. Yes, it was worth every damn penny. Olivia closed her eyes. She drifted off to sleep just before dawn. No nightmares, no anxiety. The deep, restorative sleep of a woman who had faced a brutal choice, pulled the trigger, and never looked back. Tomorrow would bring a new sunrise, new corporate fires to put out, and new battles to fight. But it would be her day, her life, her freedom, and absolutely no one was ever going to take that away from her again.